In life, there are times when people wonder why they live virtuously yet still face hardship, why they don't do bad things but still suffer many difficulties. It is at such times that people easily doubt the value of kindness, but the ancients had a comforting and profound saying: "Heaven does not forsake the virtuous." This is not just a belief, but also a life lesson that helps people maintain their good qualities amidst the conflicts and injustices of life. In today's video, we will explore the deeper meaning of this saying and why kindness is never in vain. If you enjoy profound life lessons, healing, and strengthening your mind, please subscribe to the Simple Philosophy channel to follow more meaningful content. There are sayings from ancient times that seem simple at first glance, but the longer we live and the more experiences we have, the more we realize the profound depth of human experience they contain. The saying, "Heaven does not forsake the righteous," is one such reminder. It is not only a comfort for those living virtuous lives, but also a very enduring principle of life. In a world full of struggles and self-interest, this saying is like a small lamp, helping people maintain their faith in goodness and not lose the brightest part of themselves. Many young people tend to view life with a very direct perspective. They believe that good people should be rewarded immediately, and bad people should be punished immediately. But as we mature, we realize that life doesn't operate so simply. Some people live honestly but suffer losses. Some kind people are misunderstood. Some people never do evil their whole lives, yet still face many hardships. Therefore, people sometimes doubt whether living honestly is truly worthwhile. And it is at such times that the saying, "Heaven does not forsake the righteous," reveals its true depth. The way of heaven here should not be understood merely in a spiritual sense or as some invisible power silently orchestrating everything. The way of heaven is, first and foremost, the great law of life. It is a profound sense of justice that humans do not always see immediately with their eyes. Just as in nature, sowing seeds cannot guarantee immediate fruit, so too in human life, a good deed does not always yield readily apparent results, but that doesn't mean it disappears. It is merely silently accumulating, transforming, and waiting for the opportune moment to return to the one who sowed it. But who are truly virtuous people? They aren't those who constantly preach morality, nor are they those who appear kind in front of others. Truly virtuous people maintain their integrity even when no one is watching. They don't harm others for personal gain. They don't rejoice in the suffering of others. They consider the other person's feelings before acting. They may not be perfect. They may sometimes be angry, sad, or weak-willed, but deep down, they don't want to do bad things and always strive to live in a way that their conscience is clear. That's the core point. Honesty isn't about outward appearance, but about the heart when faced with a choice. Some people are rich but honest. Some are poor but not necessarily honest. Some people speak eloquently but have narrow minds. Others live quietly, speak little, but never once hurt anyone throughout their lives. Therefore, the saying "Heaven does not forsake the honest" isn't meant to praise weakness, but to affirm the value of a very great inner quality. Many people wonder, if heaven doesn't forsake the righteous, why do they sometimes still suffer? This is something that discourages many. In reality, we often see honest people being taken advantage of, kind people being considered naive, and those who are forgiving often bearing the brunt of the suffering. Some people help others greatly, but when they face difficulties, no one helps them. Some people live decent lives, yet their path in life is fraught with obstacles. Looking at these things, many begin to believe that being good is foolish, and being honest is a disadvantage. But judging a life's journey based on only a short segment can easily lead to misunderstandings. Immediate setbacks aren't the final verdict of fate. Often, they're just a test. Life isn't measured solely by what a person receives in the present, but also by what they retain afterward. Some people lose their reputation, their peace of mind, and their integrity for a small immediate gain. Others endure temporary hardship but maintain their trust, honor, and serenity. And at some point, these seemingly intangible things become the most precious foundation of their lives. Honest people may not win quickly, but they often go further, because what they accumulate is not just money or profit, but human kindness, trust, blessings, and inner peace. A person who lives sincerely for a long time will gain people's trust. A person who works ethically for a long time will gain people's respect. A person who thinks of others for a long time will leave behind a positive influence they themselves may not have expected. That is how the natural order operates. Not noisy, not immediate, but very deep and very real. It's worth pondering that bad people sometimes benefit very quickly, while good people progress very slowly. But speed doesn't necessarily mean sustainability. Anything that comes too easily by hurting others is also easily lost in some way. Some people make money through deception, but live in fear of being exposed. Some people win through trickery, but have no sincere people around them. Some people seem very successful, but their hearts lack peace. If we look closely, we'll see that life never truly favors the bad. It's just that the price of evil often comes later. Conversely, honest people may work slower and harder, but what they gain is often something not easily lost. It's the trust of others, sleep without regret, the feeling of holding their heads high without fear of anyone bringing up a shameful past, and the realization, upon reflection, that they have retained the most precious thing in an era where people are willing to sacrifice so much for gain and loss. maintaining honesty is truly a great strength of character. Sometimes, the saying heaven rewards the righteous doesn't mean you'll be blessed with wealth or a perfect life. Many people interpret this saying too simply, only to be disappointed when reality doesn't live up to their expectations. In truth, the greatest reward for a virtuous person is often not money or fame, but a meaningful life. They may not possess much, but they have genuine relationships. They may not be outstanding, but they are respected by others. They may not avoid all hardships, but they have the inner strength to weather them without becoming bitter. That's the most precious thing, because the most terrifying aspect of suffering isn't the external loss, but the fact that it causes people to lose their inner goodness. Many people become cold-hearted because they've been betrayed, because they've been deceived. They no longer trust anyone. Because they've suffered losses, they decide to live more selfishly from now on. But if the pain transforms you into someone you no longer want to be, that's the greatest loss. Therefore, maintaining your kindness after setbacks is true strength. Of course, living honestly doesn't mean being naive. This is very important. Many people confuse honesty with leniency, kindness with a lack of boundaries. They give unconditionally to everyone, then feel pain and disappointment when they are taken advantage of. But the ancients taught very clearly that kindness without wisdom easily becomes a burden to oneself. True honesty is not about letting everyone walk all over you, but about knowing how to maintain a good heart while remaining clear-headed, knowing how to help others without losing principles, knowing how to be tolerant but not condoning evil. Truly virtuous people are those with warm hearts but clear minds. They don't overlook wrongdoing for fear of offending others. They don't suffer endlessly just to be praised. They understand that protecting themselves is also part of living righteously. When you know how to set boundaries, your kindness will have lasting value. When you know how to choose the right people to trust, your virtue won't become an opportunity for evil people. In life, we see many quiet examples showing that heaven truly does not forsake the virtuous. Some people conduct their business honestly, initially slower than others, but in the long run, customers seek them out because of trust. Some people treat their colleagues kindly, without taking credit or speaking ill of others. And when they face difficulties, many people silently help them. Some people are filial to their parents and loving towards their children, living decently with their neighbors. Outwardly, they may not be particularly outstanding, but their families are harmonious, their children and grandchildren are well behaved, and their old age is peaceful. Isn't that a very real blessing? Happiness often doesn't come in flamboyant forms, but in peace. Some people may not be wealthy, but they experience few illnesses and misfortunes. Some may not have a high-ranking job, but they always encounter kind people who support them. Some people go through many hardships yet ultimately maintain a harmonious home and a pure heart. These things, at first glance, seem ordinary, but only those who have experienced the storms of life understand that a peaceful life is truly a great gift. The saying heaven does not forsake the righteous is not meant to lull people into a false sense of security. It's a very practical reminder that everything we sow is silently returning to us in some way. It may not happen immediately, it may not happen in the form we expect, but it is certainly not meaningless. A compassionate glance, a kind word, an act of not wanting to harm anyone or contribute to shaping our own destiny. So, if you're doing well today but still feel disadvantaged, don't rush to conclude that kindness is useless. Perhaps you're just on a path where the results haven't yet blossomed. Perhaps what you hold dear today is what will save you another day. And perhaps, while you think you're losing, you're actually quietly accumulating something far more valuable. Ultimately, life doesn't just ask us how much we have, but how we've lived. Honest people aren't necessarily the happiest, but they are often the ones who don't have to bow their heads to their conscience. And that's a kind of wealth that no amount of money can buy. Therefore, perhaps the most profound lesson of this saying is this: live kindly, but with awareness. Maintain a good heart, but with principles. Believe in goodness, even when life sometimes makes you weary. Because the world may not repay you today, but the laws of heaven never forget any seeds of goodness you have sown. If you wish, I can write a more optimized version for YouTube, one that's more emotionally engaging, has a stronger, more captivating opening, and a rhythm that better matches the AI voice. There are sayings from the past that, at first glance, seem very ordinary and trivial. But the more you reflect on them, the more profound lessons you realize they are about how to treat others. The saying, lend rice, but not firewood. Lend clothes, but not shoes, is one such teaching. It's not about cold calculation or teaching selfishness, but rather a very practical life lesson. It teaches that you must help others but know your limits. It teaches you to live well but not blindly. It teaches you to maintain kindness while remaining level-headed to avoid unnecessary trouble. Many people find this saying confusing when they first hear it. Why is it that some things should be lent while others shouldn't, even though they're all about helping? Why are clothes acceptable to lend while shoes should be avoided, even though they're everyday items? On the surface, it seems like it's just about rice, firewood, clothes, or shoes. But if you look deeper, you'll realize it's a very clever metaphorical way for the ancients to talk about principles of life and boundaries in relationships. First, let's look at the first part, lending rice but not firewood. Rice is essential in life. When someone lacks rice, it means they are lacking the most basic necessities for sustenance and survival. Lending rice therefore means helping people when they need it most. It's practical, clear, and truly valuable support. A bowl of rice when hungry can help someone get through a difficult day. A little rice in times of need can provide a family with some warmth during a difficult time. Therefore, lending rice demonstrates a spirit of mutual support, sharing what is essential with others when they are in trouble. But why not lend firewood? Firewood is also necessary for daily life, so why did the ancients advise against it? Because firewood symbolizes things that are easily disputed, difficult to measure, and difficult to repay fairly. Rice can be measured quite clearly. A can, a kilogram, a bag, both the giver and the receiver can easily remember, calculate, and repay. But firewood is different. Firewood can be a little or a lot, dry or wet. Once used, it's gone, making it very difficult to determine its exact value. Such things easily lead to ambiguity, and ambiguity easily causes trouble. The ancients observed life very carefully. They understood that helping others doesn't always guarantee gratitude, and that not everything should be lent out. Some things, seemingly small, can easily cause resentment. Once things become difficult to define and measure, helping each other can easily turn into blaming. Initially, it's out of kindness, but later it becomes a reason for awkwardness, comparison, and even a breakdown in relationships. Therefore, not lending firewood is essentially a reminder to consider the consequences before helping, especially with things that are easily misunderstood. The lesson here is clear. Helping others is good, but it must be done appropriately. Giving is not always right. Some acts of help truly solve problems, but there are also acts of help that seem good but ultimately cause trouble for both sides. Our ancestors didn't teach us to be indifferent, but to distinguish between wise kindness and emotional kindness. The second part of the saying is equally profound. Lend clothes, but not shoes. Clothes can be lent in certain situations. For example, someone might need an outfit urgently, for an important event, or when they are in a difficult situation and unable to find other options. Lending clothes in such circumstances demonstrates flexibility and human kindness. It helps others avoid embarrassment and awkwardness, and sometimes even helps them save face in a sensitive situation. But shoes are different. Shoes are highly personal. They're directly related to fit, comfort, usage habits, and even privacy. An ill-fitting pair of shoes can cause foot pain, ruin the shape, and make walking difficult. A pair of borrowed shoes is also easily damaged, soiled, loses its shape, and is difficult to restore to its original condition. Therefore, shoes become a metaphor for things that belong to personal boundaries and should not be shared casually, no matter how close the relationship. Broadly speaking, this lesson isn't just about material possessions. It's also about how people need to maintain boundaries in relationships. There are things we can share, but there are also things we should keep to ourselves. There are things we can help with, but there are also aspects we shouldn't interfere in too deeply. Not because of coldness, but because everyone needs their own space to maintain their comfort, self-respect, and safety. In modern life, many people get into trouble simply because they don't know where the boundaries are. They think that if they're close friends, they can ask for anything, borrow anything, and interfere in anything. But as we mature, we understand that true closeness doesn't lie in erasing all distances, but in respecting each other's limits. A wise person isn't someone who lets others into every corner of their life, but someone who knows when to open their heart and when to maintain boundaries. The old saying is therefore very practical. It teaches that kindness should not be accompanied by leniency. If you help others without principles, you can easily make things difficult for yourself. If you are too generous in everything, you can easily get caught up in unnecessary troubles. Some people are so considerate that they lend everything, agree to everything anyone asks for, and end up losing things, losing trust, and feeling exhausted. Many relationships break down not because of big issues, but because of small things like borrowing things, asking for favors, or taking out small loans without clarification. The ancients understood human nature very well. When helping each other within reasonable limits, gratitude and respect are easily maintained. But when those limits are exceeded, help easily turns into a burden, leading to expectations, comparisons, and hurt feelings. Therefore, the greatest lesson in this saying is to know how to give in the right place, at the right time, and to the right amount. Living well doesn't mean pleasing everyone. Being kind doesn't mean opening every door for others to walk through. A mature person knows when to offer help and when to politely decline. A timely refusal isn't insensitivity. Often, it's a way to maintain long-term relationships and avoid unnecessary conflict for both parties. Ultimately, the saying "lend rice but not firewood, lend clothes but not shoes" is a profound and down-to-earth philosophy of life. It reminds us that kindness must be accompanied by wisdom. Helping others is the right thing to do, but not all help is the same. There are things that should be given because they are truly necessary. But there are also things that should be withheld because they relate to boundaries, clarity, and peace in relationships. The lessons of the ancients are never outdated. In any era, people still need to learn how to live kindly without being naive, generous without being complacent, approachable without losing boundaries. Because only when one knows how to maintain the right balance can kindness truly become something beautiful and lasting. In life, many people have found themselves in awkward situations simply because of a sense of obligation. Out of deference to friends, they lend money even when they have doubts. Out of deference to acquaintances, they lend valuable items, vehicles, or assets without thinking carefully. At first, everyone thinks it's just a normal act of helping, nothing significant. But then, a small incident occurs, a broken promise, a damaged item, or a late payment, and everything immediately becomes tense. From wanting to maintain friendship, people unintentionally push each other into conflict, discomfort, and resentment. That's also why the ancients' teachings on helping others are so practical. They didn't tell people to be selfish, nor did they teach them to be closed off from one another. What they wanted to emphasize was that helping others needs limits, consideration, and appropriate methods. If done incorrectly, the initial good intentions can sometimes become the cause of trouble later on. In modern life, this happens more often than we realize. Some people lend money to friends out of politeness, even knowing they won't be able to repay it soon. Others, reluctant to refuse, lend acquaintances their cars, computers, phones, work tools, or even very valuable possessions. Initially, everyone thinks it's a minor issue, but the more valuable the items, the more pressure can arise if things don't go as planned. If the borrower loses, damages, or fails to return the item as agreed, both parties immediately find themselves in an awkward situation. The lender is annoyed but doesn't know how to express their frustration. Speaking directly risks being perceived as calculating and damaging the relationship. Remaining silent leaves them feeling uneasy, undervalued, or disrespected. The borrower, while responsible, might feel guilty and worried, but a lack of tact could lead them to dismiss it as normal, even thinking the lender is overreacting. This disparity in perspective is the root cause of many relationships breaking down over seemingly minor issues. There's a very common type of resentment in life, helping out of emotion but paying a price in reality. When people agree to help simply because they're afraid to refuse, they often don't truly prepare themselves for the potential risks. They don't set limits, nor do they think ahead about how they'll handle things if something goes wrong. Therefore, when something bad happens, feelings of regret, frustration, and disappointment become very strong. The initial good intentions remain, but they're not enough to mask the very real discomfort in their hearts. A very common scenario involves lending a valuable item. For example, someone might own a camera, laptop, motorbike, or other important work equipment. Because they are close friends, they don't think much of it and agree to lend it to you. At the time of lending, both parties feel comfortable, even seeing it as a sign of trust. But then, during use, the item malfunctions or breaks down. From here, everything starts to change. The lender doesn't know how to broach the subject. They might think that if it were their own, they would handle it more carefully, or at least if it's damaged, they should proactively repair it or compensate properly. But not everyone shares this mindset. Some people borrow something, find it damaged, and simply offer a perfunctory apology, thinking that's enough. Others avoid the issue, delay repairs, or become annoyed at being reminded of their responsibility. And so, what started as a simple act of kindness can lead to unhappiness. One feels disrespected, the other feels pressured. Both are put in an awkward position, and the initial feelings are no longer the same. Unfortunately, in such situations, no one truly had bad intentions from the start. The lender acted with good intentions. The borrower often didn't intentionally damage the loan or cause trouble, but due to a lack of foresight, the situation ended in unpleasantness. This is precisely the kind of misguided help that the ancients always advised people to avoid. Helping in the wrong way often has three very distinct characteristics. First, it's helping out of politeness, not because it's appropriate. Second, it's helping without considering the consequences if things don't go as planned. Third, it's failing to clearly define the limits of responsibility between the two parties. When all three of these things occur, the likelihood of conflict is very high. Conversely, in modern life, there are also many people who know how to help in the right way, thus maintaining good relationships while avoiding trouble. They still live decently and are still willing to support others, but they don't help out of politeness or emotion. They understand their capabilities and help only to the extent they can. They know the difference between what can be shared and what shouldn't be lent. They also understand that sometimes a gentle refusal is a better way to maintain relationships than reluctantly agreeing and then causing problems later. For example, instead of lending a very valuable or easily damaged item, they might choose to help in a safer way. If a friend urgently needs an important device, they could help find a rental place, a suitable place to buy one, or provide direct assistance within their control. If someone is struggling financially, they could offer a small amount of help within their means, with the clear understanding that this is helping, not expecting too much in return. This practical mindset helps them avoid putting themselves in a difficult position and doesn't create excessive pressure on others. A wise person isn't someone who refuses every request, but rather someone who knows how to help in a way that doesn't harm themselves, doesn't inconvenience others, and doesn't damage the relationship in the long run. This is crucial because many people think that the more they help, the better, but that's not the case. Helping in the wrong way can sometimes be more dangerous than not helping at all. While not helping might only upset someone for a short time, helping in the wrong way can lead to lasting resentment between both parties. In relationships, especially with friends, family, or colleagues, what keeps things lasting is not just enthusiasm, but also clarity and respect for boundaries. If someone truly values you, they will understand when you can't lend them something too personal or too valuable. If someone blames you for refusing something unreasonable, then perhaps the problem isn't the help itself, but how they perceive the relationship. Ultimately, the biggest lesson in stories like these is that kindness needs to be accompanied by prudence. You shouldn't lend everything you have. You shouldn't agree to everyone's request, and not every refusal is selfish. Sometimes knowing when to stop is the best way to protect long-term relationships. Modern life makes it even more important for people to understand this. The more possessions, personal values, and overlapping relationships one has, the more crucial it becomes to maintain boundaries. A mature person isn't someone who always says yes, but someone who knows when to help, how to help, and in a way that prevents what starts as a good deed from ending in an unpleasant way. Ultimately, helping others is commendable, but helping in the right way is wise. And only when kindness is combined with wisdom can people maintain both relationships and peace in their lives. In life, everyone needs help from others at some point, and many times, we face the choice of whether or not to lend a helping hand. Many people think that kindness alone is enough, but the reality is, helping others is never just a matter of emotion. Some acts of help lead to gratitude and strengthen relationships, but there are also acts of help that, initially sincere, end up becoming a burden, a pressure, or even causing resentment. That's why the ancients always emphasized that helping others also requires wisdom. There is a very valuable type of person in life, those who know how to help in the right way. They don't always help the most, nor are they necessarily the ones who make the greatest sacrifices, but they understand the circumstances, the limitations, and what truly benefits others. Because of this, their help is usually gentle, just enough, unpretentious yet highly effective. They don't make others feel heavily indebted, nor do they put themselves in an awkward position. And most importantly, after helping, the bond of friendship remains intact. Imagine a very familiar story from modern life. Someone knows their friend is struggling with work and finances. That friend needs a sum of money to get by in the short term, but the amount needed is significant. If judged solely on emotion, many might immediately lend everything they have to show their friendship. But those who know how to help properly think differently. They don't flatly refuse, nor do they impulsively agree. They consider their capabilities, assessing how much they can help without disrupting their own lives. Ultimately, instead of lending a large sum beyond their means, they chose to provide a manageable amount, while also offering a temporary job opportunity or connecting their friend with another reliable source of support. This kind of help wasn't ostentatious, but it was very practical. It didn't put financial pressure on the giver, nor did it burden the recipient with excessive debt. As a result, both felt relieved. The person in need received timely support, and the helper avoided unnecessary complications. And best of all, the relationship remained strong. That's the power of helping the right way. When someone is both kind and level-headed, their help is often more lasting, wholesome, and far more valuable than impulsive, emotional actions. Because sometimes, what others need isn't for you to shoulder all their problems for them, but enough support to help them stand on their own 2 feet. In life, there's a very common misconception. Many people think that the more help they give, the more valuable it is. But in reality, excessive help isn't always good. If the help requires too much sacrifice, exceeds your capabilities, or disrupts the stability of your life, it can easily become a burden in the long run. Initially, you help out of compassion, but later it can lead to pressure, fatigue, and even resentment. At that point, what was originally good intentions can easily turn into a source of negativity. Many people have found themselves in similar situations. They help others with all sincerity, but because they don't know their limits, they later suffer the consequences. Some lend money beyond their means and end up in financial hardship themselves. Some take on too many responsibilities for friends, affecting their personal work. Others take on too much support, ultimately feeling exhausted and disappointed when they are not understood. Such stories clearly show that kindness alone is not enough. Helping others without wisdom sometimes not only fails to solve the problem, but also creates more trouble for both parties. Wisdom in helping others begins with understanding their situation. Not everyone in need of help needs the same kind. Some need money, but others truly need advice, a connection, an opportunity, or simply to be heard. If you only focus on giving what you have without understanding what the other person truly needs, your help may not address the problem. In that case, you've put in the effort, but the results will be minimal. Wisdom in helping others also lies in knowing when to set boundaries. You can be kind to others, but that doesn't mean you have to shoulder their burdens. You can offer support, but that doesn't mean you have to sacrifice everything to save someone from their difficulties. Everyone has their own journey, their own lessons, and their own responsibilities in life. If helping someone deprives them of the ability to stand on their own 2 feet, then that help can inadvertently foster dependence. The right kind of help is to lift someone up, not carry them forever. They offer support, but don't take away the other person's responsibility for their own growth. This is a crucial boundary that not everyone recognizes. Some people, out of excessive love, do everything for them, worry about everything, and even make decisions for them. But ultimately, this doesn't make the other person stronger. It only makes them accustomed to dependence. Helping effectively also requires clarity. Whether you're helping someone with money, time, work, or responsibilities, the clearer you are from the start, the better. Clarity isn't coldness, it's a way to maintain a healthy relationship. When things are ambiguous, people easily misinterpret things, have different expectations, and then become disappointed in each other. Many conflicts in life don't stem from ill will, but from a lack of clarity at the outset. People who know how to help properly often share a very valuable common trait. They don't help to show off, they don't help to feel indebted, and they don't help impulsively. They help because they genuinely want what's best for the other person, and because they want that good deed to last without harming anyone. It is this calmness that makes their kindness deeper, more trustworthy, and more enduring. Ultimately, helping others is a beautiful thing in life, but that beauty is only truly complete when it is accompanied by wisdom. A kind heart without wisdom can exhaust both the giver and the receiver. Conversely, just the right amount of help, given at the right time and in the right way, can become a great gift, not only solving immediate difficulties but also preserving lasting respect and friendship. Therefore, perhaps the most profound lesson is this: when you see someone in need, open your heart. But before reaching out, take a moment of clear-headedness to ask yourself what is most appropriate. Sometimes, helping a little but doing the right thing is more valuable than helping a lot but doing the wrong thing. Sometimes, wisdom in how you give is what keeps your kindness from becoming a burden, and that's also a way for people to live kindly with each other without losing peace in their own lives. In life, many people are very kind but often feel tired, disadvantaged, and vulnerable in relationships. They help others with all sincerity, always hesitant to refuse, always afraid of upsetting someone. But later, they realize that their kindness is sometimes not appreciated as much as they hoped. Sometimes they are taken advantage of. Sometimes they put themselves in awkward situations. Sometimes they help others so much that they themselves become exhausted, and the root cause often lies in their inability to distinguish between kindness and being too accommodating. Many people still think that giving a lot, being patient, and never refusing anyone is kindness. But in reality, kindness doesn't mean always opening your doors to everyone. A kind person is someone who knows how to help at the right time, in the right way, and within limits. A person who is too accommodating is someone who helps without thinking, without principles, without considering the consequences, and often acts only on emotion or out of politeness. These two things may seem similar on the surface, but their essence is very different. Kindness is a beautiful quality, but complacency is a dangerous state. Kind people care about others, but they maintain their composure so as not to harm themselves. They understand that helping others is the right thing to do, but not every request should be accepted. They consider whether what they do is truly helpful, appropriate to the circumstances, and within their capabilities. Because of this careful consideration, their kindness is often healthy and lasting. Conversely, those who are too accommodating often help out of reflex. They are afraid to say no. They fear being judged as cold, selfish, or inconsiderate. Therefore, they often agree even when they feel uncomfortable. They lend things they don't really want to lend. They take on tasks beyond their capabilities. They agree to things that are inherently inappropriate simply because they lack the strength to refuse. As a result, they are left exhausted, resentful, and self-reproachful. This is no longer kindness but a lack of boundaries. One of the clearest signs to distinguish between kindness and leniency is the feeling after helping someone. Kind people usually feel relieved because they know they have done the right thing within their capabilities. Lenient people, on the other hand, often feel burdened because deep down they know they have overstepped their boundaries but dare not admit it. When helping someone requires too much sacrifice, causing prolonged discomfort or unease, it is very likely no longer true kindness. In relationships, especially with family, friends, or colleagues, boundaries are extremely important. Unfortunately, many people misunderstand them. They think that setting limits will make them seem distant, cold, or insincere. In reality, boundaries don't diminish kindness. On the contrary, boundaries help to strengthen kindness. What are boundaries? It's about each person understanding what they can share and what they should keep to themselves. It's the ability to clearly articulate what they can accept and what they can no longer tolerate. It's knowing where support lies and where it begins to become a burden or an intrusion. A person with boundaries isn't someone who is closed off, but rather someone who knows how to keep their kindness from being misused. Imagine someone who is always ready to lend money or things to friends, help with personal matters, support them with work, and listen to their troubles day and night. Initially, everyone would find that person very enthusiastic and admirable. But if this continues without limits, that person easily becomes the default crutch for everyone. What was once voluntary help then begins to turn into an unspoken obligation. And once they can no longer continue as before, others easily feel disappointed, even resentful. This is very unfair, but it happens very often with people who don't know how to set boundaries. The truth is, People often get used to the kindness of others very quickly. When someone is always readily available, it's easy to forget that it's kindness, not an obligation. Therefore, if you don't set limits for yourself, others may unconsciously cross those limits without realizing it. Only when you're tired or hurt will you realize you've given too much and not kept enough for yourself. Setting boundaries doesn't mean refusing every request. It simply means knowing what's right for you. You can help others to the best of your ability, but you don't have to sacrifice your own peace of mind for the sake of others' satisfaction. You can listen, but you don't need to become someone's dumping ground. You can give, but that doesn't mean you have to share everything you have. A mature person knows how to say no without feeling guilty. They understand that not all refusals are selfish. Some refusals are actually ways to protect both parties. Trying to help when you're unable to do so can easily lead to undesirable consequences. Reluctantly agreeing to help often diminishes your efforts, and exceeding your limits in helping others can lead to resentment towards the very person you wanted to help. The most important thing is to understand that kindness needs principles. Without principles, kindness is easily eroded, misunderstood, or exploited. But with principles, your kindness becomes clearer, more steadfast, and more valuable. Others will also learn to respect you more. Life will always present people who need help, and there will also always be people willing to cross the line if you don't protect yourself. Therefore, learning to distinguish between kindness and leniency is a crucial lesson for living a more peaceful life. You don't need to become cold to avoid hurt. You just need to be more discerning in how you give. Ultimately, kindness isn't about how much you sacrifice for others, but about whether you know how to help in the right way. A warm heart is precious, but without a clear head, that heart easily becomes weary. And once kindness is exhausted, people easily become hardened, skeptical, and lose faith in relationships. Therefore, live kindly. But remember that kindness doesn't mean being unconditionally open-hearted. Help when you should help, refuse when you need to refuse. Keep clear boundaries, not to distance yourself from life, but so that your kindness can endure without eroding. That is what mature kindness is, a kindness that is not weak, not fragile, and strong enough to embrace others without losing oneself. Helping others is a beautiful thing, but knowing how to help correctly is an art of living that not everyone understands early on. Many people enter life with very kind hearts. They are ready to give, ready to extend a helping hand when they see others in difficulty. But as they mature, they realize that kindness alone is not enough. Sometimes helping others warms their hearts and improves relationships, but there are also times when, after helping, they are left with only fatigue, pressure, and disappointment. This is because helping others without clear thinking can easily turn good intentions into problems. Wise people are not heartless or self-centered. They still help others and live kindly, but they consider the consequences before extending a hand. They understand that kindness, if it wants to last, must be guided by principles. Without principles, people can easily get caught up in awkward situations, harming themselves and not necessarily benefiting others. The first method for helping others wisely is to carefully consider their circumstances. Not everyone in need of help needs the same kind. Some may be short of money, while others may lack direction, opportunities, or simply need timely advice. Reacting emotionally without clearly understanding the problem can easily lead to helping the wrong person. You might give a lot, but what the other person receives might not truly address their needs. For example, someone might complain about their job and feel stuck. If you just listen and rush to help with money or take over some of their responsibilities, you might only be addressing the symptoms without tackling the root cause. Meanwhile, if you calmly listen, help them see the problem clearly, introduce a suitable opportunity, or connect them with someone who can provide the right support, it can sometimes be far more effective. Helping effectively isn't about giving the most, but about helping with what's most needed. The second crucial point is to consider the level of closeness. This is something many people overlook, thinking that everyone should help equally when they are in need. However, in reality, the degree of closeness and understanding between two people greatly influences how you offer help. With family members, you can be more flexible because you understand their personality, circumstances, and responsibilities. But with acquaintances, colleagues, or those with less deep relationships, help should be more measured and clearly defined. It's not about discrimination, but about how close relationships are, determining trust and the ability to handle problems when they arise. The more it involves money, property, work, or long-term responsibilities, the more carefully you need to consider whether the relationship is strong enough to bear the consequences. Many people lose money, possessions, and even relationships not because they met bad people from the start, but because they gave too much help to relationships that weren't strong enough. The third method is to always assess your own capabilities before helping. This sounds simple, but it's the hardest to implement. Many good people tend to forget their limits. They think that if they can make a little extra effort, they should. If they suffer a little themselves so that others suffer less, it's worth it. But this way of thinking, if prolonged, will turn kindness into a burden. You can only help others sustainably when you yourself are financially stable. If you're struggling financially and still try to lend a large sum, you're likely to become stressed afterward. If you're exhausted and still take on extra work to help others, sooner or later you'll become tired and irritable. If you always put the needs of others above your own, you'll gradually feel drained. At that point, helping no longer comes from a kind heart, but becomes a stressful sacrifice. Wise people understand that helping within their means and in moderation is better than helping excessively. A moderate but sustainable amount of support is always more valuable than a single large-scale effort that leaves lasting consequences. You don't need to be the savior of the world. Simply being someone who knows how to give in a healthy, timely way without losing yourself is already invaluable. Besides knowing how to help, an equally important life skill is knowing when to say no. This is something many people find difficult, not because they don't know what's reasonable, but because they're afraid of upsetting others, afraid of being judged as changed, cold, or lacking in compassion. But the truth is, sometimes refusing is a better way to maintain relationships than reluctantly agreeing. A reluctant agreement can easily lead to unpleasantness later on. When you agree to help with something you're not comfortable with, you're likely to do it under pressure, feeling tired, or expecting excessive gratitude. If things don't go as planned afterward, you're even more likely to be disappointed and lose interest. Meanwhile, a gentle but clear refusal from the start helps both parties avoid misunderstandings and maintain respect. Saying no doesn't mean being harsh. The key is how you say it. A wise refusal always has 3 elements: gentleness, sincerity, and clarity. Gentleness so the listener doesn't feel rejected or hurt. Sincerity so they understand you're not refusing because you look down on them, but because you genuinely aren't a good fit for the situation. And clarity to avoid creating false hope or keeping them waiting. Sometimes, simply being honest and kind is enough. You don't need to come up with complicated excuses. Sometimes, the more roundabout you are, the more likely you are to misunderstand or try to persuade someone further. Clarity isn't coldness, it's a way of showing respect for both yourself and the other person. A mature person knows how to maintain goodwill even when refusing. It's important to remember that if a relationship only lasts because you're always sacrificing and never allowed to say no, then it's not a healthy relationship. Someone who truly respects you will understand your limits. They might be a little upset, but they won't turn to blaming or belittling you over a reasonable refusal. Conversely, if someone always demands your availability, chances are they're more accustomed to receiving than to considering your needs. Life will always present moments when you need to choose between pleasing others and maintaining your own peace. Wise people don't choose extremes. They don't close their hearts, but neither do they open them unconditionally. They know when to help, when to stop, and when to say no to maintain balance. Ultimately, helping others wisely is a manifestation of mature kindness. It's when you give not just out of emotion, but also with understanding and self-respect. You still live kindly, but without letting your kindness get the better of you. You remain open to life, but without losing your own boundaries. And perhaps, that is the most sustainable way to live. A way of life where you can still do good for others, but at the same time maintain peace, clarity, and dignity in your own life. In life, kindness is always a beautiful thing. Everyone hopes to meet kind people when they are in difficulty, and many want to be a support for others when they need it. But the longer one lives, the more one realizes a very true thing. Being kind isn't enough. Giving a lot doesn't guarantee maintaining friendship. And being willing to help doesn't always mean everything will end smoothly. There are very sincere good intentions, but when misplaced or misused, they ultimately become the cause of trouble, conflict, and resentment. That's also why our ancestors left behind sayings that seem very ordinary, but contain a great lesson about how to live. These teachings don't advise people to be cold or selfish. On the contrary, they remind us that kindness is precious and therefore needs to be used wisely. Because without discernment, kindness can easily be misused at the wrong time and towards the wrong people, and then the most beautiful thing in a person can become the most exhausting. The first practical lesson everyone should remember is that helping others is valuable, but you must know how to help appropriately. You shouldn't accept help just because someone asks. You shouldn't immediately pour all your resources into rescuing someone in need. Helping others correctly isn't about how much you give, but about whether what you give is truly appropriate to the situation and genuinely solves the problem. Some people face financial difficulties, but what they really need isn't just money, but a long-term path to stability. Some complain about life, but what they lack is someone to listen, not a barrage of advice. Some ask for help with a specific task, but what they need most might just be a little time, a connection, or a proper referral. If we only look at problems emotionally, we can easily help in the wrong way. And when we help incorrectly, not only does it fail to solve anything, but sometimes it makes things even more complicated. The second lesson is not to let kindness become the cause of trouble. This is something many kind people learn through conflicts and hurt experiences. Some people, out of politeness, lend money, lend things, agree to help, vouch for others, or interfere in other people's private affairs without thinking carefully. At first, they think they are only doing a good deed, but then, when things don't go as planned, they are the ones who bear the pressure, responsibility, or find themselves in an awkward position. A broken item, a late payment, a broken promise, an unappreciated act of kindness all can cause relationships to break down. Sadly, most of these stories don't begin with malice. They begin with boundless kindness. And that's why wisdom in helping others is so important. The third lesson is that knowing when to be moderate helps others while maintaining peace of mind for oneself. Many people think that setting limits makes them less kind, but in reality, limits don't diminish kindness. On the contrary, they help kindness last longer and become healthier. A person who always gives unconditionally is easily exhausted. A person who always agrees to every request easily makes things difficult for themselves. But a person who knows how much they can help, knows what is appropriate, and knows when to stop, will not let their kindness become a burden. Maintaining moderation doesn't mean living a life of emptiness. It simply means knowing how to balance helping others with maintaining your own peace. You can be ready when truly needed, but you don't necessarily have to sacrifice everything just to please others. You can extend a helping hand at the right time, but you don't need to open every door in your life for just anyone to walk through. That balance is the true expression of mature kindness. Looking deeper, the greatest meaning in the ancients' teachings is that kindness must be accompanied by wisdom. This is not a lesson to restrict kindness, but rather to protect it from being misused. Because once kindness constantly brings you pressure, hurt, or the feeling of being exploited, you easily become weary and lose faith in humanity. Some people are initially very warm-hearted, but after a few setbacks in life, they gradually close their hearts, become suspicious of anyone who asks for their help, and eventually no longer want to help anyone. That is a great pity. The ancients understood this nature very well, so they didn't teach people to give unconditionally, but rather how to use kindness in a way that doesn't harm oneself or cause more trouble for others. Properly given help brings peace of mind to the recipient and serenity to the giver. Incorrectly given help, however, often puts pressure on one party, creates awkwardness for the other, and ultimately leaves both exhausted. In relationships, especially with family, friends, and colleagues, knowing how to set boundaries is incredibly important. Boundaries aren't walls separating people, but rather healthy limits that allow relationships to last. Without boundaries, people easily intrude too deeply into each other's private lives, become overly reliant, have excessive expectations, and then become disappointed. With clear boundaries, help becomes more targeted, and relationships become stronger. A person who knows how to help properly is someone who not only sees the difficulties of others, but also recognizes their own limitations. They don't help to prove themselves kind, nor do they help out of fear of judgment. They help because they genuinely want what's best for the other person, but at the same time understand that help is only beautiful when it doesn't hurt either party. That is kindness with depth. That is kindness coupled with understanding. Ultimately, the greatest practical lesson for each of us is this: live a good life, but don't be complacent. Be open-hearted, but not unconditionally. Help others whenever you can, but don't forget to ask yourself if it's appropriate, necessary, and within your capabilities, because a limited kindness isn't less kindness, but rather more enduring kindness. And perhaps that is also the deepest meaning that the ancients wanted to convey. They didn't want people to love each other less. They only wanted people to learn to love each other in a more proper way, so that after each act of giving, we wouldn't have to carry more trouble, wouldn't have to bear resentment, and wouldn't lose precious relationships just because of misplaced help. Knowing how to help appropriately and maintain boundaries will help people avoid many troubles in life. More importantly, it will preserve a heart that is warm enough to be kind to others, but also clear-headed enough not to lose one's own peace of mind. And that is perhaps one of the most valuable kinds of wisdom a mature person should possess. In this hectic life, kindness remains essential. We all have moments of vulnerability, hardship, and when we need a helping hand. But the more challenges we face, the more we understand that kindness alone is not enough. Without discernment, kindness can easily become a burden, easily misplaced, and sometimes even strain beautiful relationships. The most valuable thing is not how many people you help, but knowing how to help correctly. When you consider the circumstances, assess your own capabilities, and maintain necessary boundaries, your help becomes gentler and more sustainable. In doing so, you not only protect yourself from unnecessary trouble, but also maintain harmony, respect, and lasting relationships with those around you. Our ancestors left behind teachings that seem simple at first glance, but if you truly reflect on them, they are all life experiences distilled over generations. And perhaps, one of the wisest things everyone should learn is to use kindness with both heart and mind. If you find this video insightful and meaningful, please like, share, and subscribe to the Simple Philosophy channel to spread profound, relatable, and thought-provoking life lessons together every day. Who knows, just one well-timed video might help someone live a lighter, wiser, and more peaceful life journey.